The margins between winning and losing are extraordinarily thin, and the mental state a player carries onto the court, the level of focus, of belief, of emotional steadiness can be the deciding factor when everything else is evenly matched. Gauff will need to find a way to channel the emotion of this moment constructively, to use it as fuel rather than allow it to become a distraction. Those who know her career well, who have watched her navigate adversity and emerge stronger on the other side, will have every reason to believe she is capable of doing exactly that. What this episode has also done, regardless of how the coming weeks unfold on the court, is add another significant chapter to the ongoing and deeply important conversation about how the achievements in humanity of elite women tennis players are treated by the media, by broadcasters, by fans, and by the institutions that govern and promote the sport. Coco Gauff is, at this moment, the most prominent figure in women's tennis. The way she is covered, discussed, and evaluated sets a tone that filters down through the entire ecosystem of the sport. When a player of her standing feels compelled to stand in front of the press and say, in plain terms, that the respect is missing, that is a statement the sport cannot and should not ignore. It is a moment that carries meaning far beyond one tournament, one press conference, or one emotional afternoon. It is a moment that asks a direct question of everyone who covers, watches, and cares about women's tennis. What does genuine respect for these athletes actually look like, and are we truly giving it? Only time will reveal how this chapter shapes the next stage of Coco Gauff's remarkable journey, and what it ultimately asks of the sport she has already done so much to elevate. There was also a subset of commentary from those who interpreted her words as overly sensitive, or as deflection from a disappointing performance on court, a response that, in the view of many observers, rather proved the point she had been making. The readiness with which some sections of the public moved to undermine the substance of her statement by reframing it as emotional excess was itself a vivid illustration of the dynamic she had taken pains to articulate. From a sporting perspective, it is worth considering what this moment means for Gauff's form and focus as the season continues. Players of her caliber are well practiced at the art of mental compartmentalization, the ability to set aside off-court noise and return their attention, when the moment demands it, to the technical and tactical demands of competing at the highest level. Gauff has demonstrated that capacity on many occasions. But it would be naive to suggest that a press conference moment of this magnitude, and the conversation it has generated, will simply dissolve without trace. These things have weight. They require processing time, and how Gauff manages the emotional aftermath of this particular public statement will, in some measure, shape the form she brings to the courts in the weeks that follow. There is also the question of rivalry dynamics and the broader competitive landscape of the women's tour. The WTA field at the elite level has never been more competitive, with a group of players capable on any given day of defeating anyone in the draw. During the press conference, she revealed that this dynamic had been building for some time, and that what had happened around this particular match had pushed the situation to a point where she felt it was necessary to address it directly and publicly. She explained that she had chosen on previous occasions to absorb the noise and focus on her game, believing that her results would speak for themselves. But she made clear that silence can only be maintained for so long before it begins to feel like acceptance of something that is not acceptable. And that was a line, she said plainly, that she was not willing to keep crossing. The reaction from within the tennis world was swift and largely supportive. Several of Gauff's fellow WTA players took to social media in the hours following the press conference to express solidarity with the sentiments she had shared. Some were explicit in their support, while others used more indirect language, but the general direction of the response from within the locker room was unmistakable. Players who have themselves navigated the particular pressures that come with performing under the weight of expectation and public scrutiny, and on the WTA tour, that group is substantial, appeared to recognize in Gauff's words an experience that resonated with their own. That kind of collective recognition matters. It signals that what Gauff was describing was not an isolated personal grievance, but something that speaks to a broader culture around how elite women athletes are discussed, judged, and valued. Fan reaction across social media platforms and tennis forums was similarly strong. The clip of Gauff's press conference, which circulated widely within minutes of the session ending, accumulated millions of views within the first 24 hours. The comment sections were dominated by expressions of support, with many fans describing her remarks as courageous and necessary. And yet, as Gauff explained during the press conference, the respect that ought to accompany that status has not always been present in the conversations around her game, her performances, or her standing in the sport. She spoke at length about the way her losses are treated differently to the losses of other players, the way a single defeat is often magnified into a narrative of decline or doubt, while similar results from other competitors are framed simply as part of the natural rhythm of a long season. She acknowledged that she understands scrutiny is part of the territory when you hold the world #1 ranking, but she drew a firm and important distinction between scrutiny and what she described as a pattern of dismissiveness that she felt had increasingly crept into the public and media discourse surrounding her career. The timing of this moment was significant. Gauff had arrived at the tournament on the back of several weeks of intense competition, having navigated a demanding stretch of the WTA calendar with the kind of relentless schedule that rarely allows top players even the most basic opportunity to rest, recalibrate, or find any semblance of normal routine. The physical toll of the WTA season at the elite level is considerable, and that toll compounds over weeks and months in ways that are not always visible to the viewing public. But beyond the physical demands, Gauff had also been dealing with an elevated level of external commentary, criticism from certain quarters that she described as failing to give proper credit to her achievements while simultaneously holding her to a standard that no other player on the tour was being asked to meet. Clear that the conversation was not going to stay on the subject of tennis alone. What followed over the next 30-plus minutes was one of the most candid, emotionally resonant press conference performances that WTA journalists and regulars on the tour could remember witnessing. In a long time, Gauff did not raise her voice. She did not lose her composure, but she spoke with a clarity and a directness that left absolutely no room for misinterpretation. She made it clear, in measured but unmistakable terms, that she felt a fundamental lack of respect had been shown, not just toward her as a competitor, but toward what she has built, what she represents, and the standard she has set on the women's tour over the past several seasons. If you enjoy in-depth WTA coverage and emotional tennis stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates from the world of women's tennis. To fully understand why this press conference landed with such force, it is important to understand the context in which Coco Gauff currently exists within women's professional tennis. At just 20 years of age, Gauff has already achieved what many players spend entire careers chasing. Her Grand Slam title at the US Open, secured with a level of composure that belied her youth, announced her arrival at the very top of the sport in definitive terms. Since then, she has not simply maintained that position, she has reinforced it, building one of the most consistent records on the WTA tour and demonstrating, season after season, that her game has continued to evolve and deepen in ways that suggest her best tennis is still ahead of her. She is, by almost any measure, the defining player of her generation in women's tennis. There are moments in professional tennis that go far beyond the scoreboard, moments that reveal the human being behind the rankings, the sacrifices behind the titles, and the emotional weight that comes with competing at the highest level of women's sport, week after week, tournament after tournament, often without the recognition or the respect that the effort truly deserves. What unfolded in the hours following one of the most emotionally charged matches of the WTA season was not simply a reaction to a difficult loss or an unexpected defeat. It was something deeper than that. It was the culmination of weeks of pressure, public scrutiny, and what many observers described as a sustained pattern of disrespect directed at one of the brightest and most important figures in women's tennis today. Coco Gauff, the American world #1, walked into that press conference carrying far more than the weight of a single match. And what she said and how she said it left the tennis world standing completely still. The atmosphere inside the post-match press room was noticeably tense from the moment Gauff sat down in front of the assembled media. Those who were present described her demeanor as composed but visibly affected, the kind of controlled emotion that an experienced professional learns to hold in place, even when the feeling underneath is anything but calm. She had just come off the court following an extraordinarily difficult match, one that had pushed her physically and mentally to the edge. And the questions that immediately began flowing from the press gallery made it clear that the conversation was not going to stay on the subject of tennis alone.